It's Hat Day. That's kind of
It's Hat Day here
yeah.
on the Food Tech News Show, and we are live. We're a minute late. And
Oh.
Carlos was just lecturing me on how to properly do a Twitch live stream or a StreamYard live stream. I didn't do it right.
Lecture's a strong word. I wasn't lecturing. I was just offering up some tips and tricks. We'll do it next time.
And people may or may not know this, but you spent a lot of time. You actually worked for Twitch for some time.
Yeah, I worked for Crown, which is a part of Twitch, and we did it like for a full year and did tons of streaming, tons of shows. I really liked my job there. So yeah, I'm no stranger to this streaming business.
Well, welcome everyone. This is the Food Tech News Show, March 22nd, 2024. My name is Michael Wolf, and we have with us Carlos Rodella. We're both dialing in from Washington State remotely. We're both like in separate places, but at some point, maybe we'll do it in the same place.
At some point, I'm going to have that happen. We're going to have an in-studio thing, and I'm going to make it happen. Also, in chat, they say it's Black Hat Day. It is. For some reason. We didn't plan it.
We are going to be talking about a few stories, primarily around funding, and then we're going to talk about cultivated meat, in part because I was at the Future Food Tech Conference down in San Francisco. I went on a little field trip this week. I went down to San Francisco, and the big alternative protein show called Future Food Tech, I was there. It's actually the first time I've ever went. I've written about it before because I've been watching it from afar. But I tasted my first cultivated meat.
And how was it?
Well, let's not spoil it.
Oh, yeah. Wait, you have to wait into the show. We'll talk about it. Yeah.
But let's kind of segue our way there. We'll navigate our way there. But first, I want to talk about this massive funding round that a company called Wonder raised this week. I don't know. Do you remember the Wonder vans? We've written about them before at the Spoon. Is this idea, a founder named Mark Lohr started this company, raised like $900 million before this week. And the original vision was he's going to have these customized delivery vans that would deliver you meals to your curbside and like a white glove service. They would finish the cook at your curb, bring it in, and it cost him a boatload of money. And then like about a year or two into it, he scrapped the whole van concept and then started just being more of a traditional meal delivery service. They also acquired Blue Apron. Do you remember Blue Apron?
I do remember Blue Apron, and I do remember seeing these vans.
Oh yeah, did you ever do the meal kit with Blue Apron?
I didn't. There's so many meal kits that I've almost done. You know, like you go to the checkout and you're like about to do it, and then you don't. But yeah, I remember seeing the vans, and I didn't do Blue Apron. So what's the deal now, though? What are they doing if they're not doing the vans?
Well, he basically has gone to be a more traditional meal delivery service, but also now he's opening up a bunch of little restaurants and he's creating these virtualized, he's doing deals with chefs. So you could go to like a Wonder store, primarily on the East Coast around New York, and get meals with recipes from chefs. And he's going to open a bunch of other ones. He's also doing deals with Walmart. So you're going to see these little Wonder mini kitchens within Walmarts. So that's part of his deal. So,
yeah, I went to the website and I saw Bobby Flay was on the site. So it's like doing deals with bigger chefs, right?
So I have to wonder how much of this money is going to these chefs for licensing deals.
Jeez, probably a lot. Probably a lot. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. I don't know about you personally, but we try to represent everybody, I think, also on the show. The every man, every woman. I don't necessarily need Bobby Flay's meals, right? If I'm doing delivery. Is that what they're betting on? That people really want like big name chefs to be cooking their meals?
I think they're betting on that these celebrity chefs have brands that people recognize. And because of that, there'll be some trust that you won't get a gross meal. Because if you look at the virtual restaurant space, there's so many that popped up. A lot of them had unsatisfied customers. I don't know. Did you ever order from Beast Burger? I mean, that was kind of a video game adjacent virtual restaurant. Mr. Beast did a licensing deal with another company called, I think VDC, and they ended up hating each other and suing each other because Mr. Beast was mad about the quality of the hamburgers. So that whole space has just had a whole bunch of trouble. And I think that's so what he's basically betting on, I think, is that, these big name chefs will connote trust and people will order from them because, hey, you're not going to get a bad meal from something associated with the Bobby Flay.
Got it. But it also is based on location, right? So like if you're not in that location, you're not going to get Bobby Flay's meals. Is that right?
Yeah, I think there's a Wonder app, but also you could find these restaurants popping up in your usual Uber Eats or whatever the online ordering apps you'll find. It'll be very geographic specific. So you'll find one that's, if he's done a deal with a restaurant in New Jersey, you're going to be able to find that if you're sitting in Hoboken or whatever, and then that'll deliver to you. But
yeah, I think this works really best in the on location type thing, because if it's a pop up, that makes sense to me. You know what I mean? Like you happen to be, like you said, what, Walmart and stuff like that. Like you're in this location, you're like, wow, I've never had, not to reuse Bobby Flay, but like his meals. And so now we have the chance to do it. I think that makes sense in that kind of setting, but I'm not sure about the delivery aspect. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how happy the chefs are. I mean, if the results start pouring in, because they're ultimately relying on, Wonder's Kitchen to cook these things to make people happy. And overall, I have to say, Wonder has had pretty high reviews, at least when they're delivering the food on the vans.
Mm-hmm.
Customer reviews are pretty happy, or pretty good. And so they have a track record of making decent food, unlike the Beast Burger scenario or some of the other virtual restaurant brands. So
yeah.
But the reason I brought this up is because of our second story. So I wrote a story for The Spoon this week. Let me show this. There was a report put out by PitchBook. PitchBook is one of those analyst firms that does market sizing and follows venture funding for different verticals. And one of the ones they follow for is food tech. And their food tech analyst, Alex Frederick, wrote a report about the Q3 funding and overall Q4 funding for 2023 and overall 2023. And it dropped by 60%. That's a massive drop. You just see that cliff it fell off there in that picture.
Mm.
And the reason for that is a couple different spaces within the food tech area. Ghost kitchens, cultivated meat, and some of the restaurant tech. Also the grocery delivery space. All those kind of fell off a cliff. And so that really kind of drove the whole sector down. And if you look back at 2021 and then 2022, 2021 was going crazy because all these quick delivery grocery stores were getting tons of money in the hundreds of millions. Also, you saw like Eat Just and Upside getting big rounds for their late round funding to build up their scale up for their cultivated meat. And all that money's gone away.
Yeah.
So
there's a very good similarity with the gaming business right now, because again, you look at that spike, bring that chart up again. The spike was 2021, like you said, right? That's like still pandemic, area. And not like we're fully out of it either, but like when that happened, everyone's staying home, again, all these companies were getting money because they just saw for the foreseeable future, we're going to have tons of business. And the gaming industry was very similar. They staffed up during 2020, 2021, and now we're seeing a massive layoff spike in the gaming industry. I was part of it.
You're part of it.
Yeah, and so I feel like that is part of this. We're like both working the controls here on the stream. You know what I mean? I think that there's something similar to be said about that.
Yeah, and I think Alex made it clear, and I think just in general, it should be known that the overall funding for all the startups across gaming, food tech, with the exception maybe AI, most sectors within the broader technology space have seen pretty big declines. The one exception seems to be artificial intelligence, which was obviously spurred by ChatGPT and the whole generative AI push.
Yeah.
So,
and I think even though that 60% drop seems huge, again, like we just said, put it kind of relative to the situation at hand. You and I both know that there's tons of money still being spent on food tech. And it's a huge growing sector. So it's just kind of, comparing that to the situation at hand, I think.
I mean, I think that there's a lot less being spent now than there was. And so, I'll talk about it in just a bit, my trip down to the future food tech space, because it seemed like a lot of folks were talking about how they needed to conserve their cash, and they're all talking about how they need to find returns. And that really kind of brings up this next story. There's been a couple of stories popping up for the past couple of months from cultivated meat companies. And let me see the one here. I'm still trying to figure out how to do the controls here, but one of them was Upside. This was, I think, in February. They pulled back on their big expansion. They were going to move into, I think, Chicago or Illinois and do a big next generation production facility. And they pulled back on that. Eat Just, which is the other big one that has gone like in the hundreds of millions of dollars of funding. They have essentially pulled back on their production expansion plans. And both of these companies essentially have seen, still figuring out these controls, man. Okay. Both of these companies, like last year, they announced that they're going to be pushing their first product into high-end restaurants. I think Upside was, I think Eat Just was working with Jose Andres, and Upside was working with another one. And both of those high-end restaurant experiments or pop-ups have gone away. And so right now in the US, you really can't get cultivated meat anywhere.
Wow. Yeah, I was just going to say, let's get into like what it actually is. But like, if we can't even get it right now, I guess it doesn't matter. But yeah,
I mean, it's probably it's probably only going to be a temporary situation. But some people are wondering, where can you buy it? What's the deal? What does it say for the space if you can't actually buy it right now?
Yeah, so like let's talk about what it is, because as I buy a lot of veggie products, I buy a lot of fake, in quotes, fake meat. There's so many brands I love, including Nugs. Nugs is one of my favorite. It's such a funny name, Nuggs. All that, a lot of that is pea protein, soy protein, and so many different types of things in them. Sometimes there's like more things in them than just like getting meat. But when it comes to cultivated meat, what is the differentiator there to like a veggie food that you would buy in the grocery store sometimes?
I think a lot of people who are skeptical of it will just refer to it as lab grown meat. The industry doesn't like that term because it just sounds kind of gross. Like, who wants to eat meat grown in a lab? The industry has debated what to call it. Early on, it was called clean meat. And then it went to cultivated or cultured meat. And that's kind of what they've settled on, cultivated meat. And the main difference is the idea is you're basically growing or reproducing meat cells in a big metal vat called a bioreactor. And so I was just talking about this with my kids. It's kind of crazy, but the original concept for cultivated meat, for those who don't know, people started talking about this almost a century ago. Winston Churchill was doing some future casting, talking about what the world will be like, 50 years from now, 100 years from now. And he actually brought up this concept of, hey, in the future, we won't necessarily need to grow a whole animal and then slaughter it. We may be able to just produce the part of the animal that we want to eat. So He basically was talking about the idea of cultivated meat almost 100 years ago. I think it was like around 1930. And my kids couldn't believe it. My son couldn't believe it. Like, what? So I had to actually bring up the story about it. Kind of crazy. So about, 10 years ago, the first lab grown hamburger or cultivated meat hamburger was produced, really kicked off a lot of interest in the space. 10 years before that, I think NASA and some other folks were looking at the concept, but it really didn't get commercialized or produced in any way until about 2013. And since then, you've seen a bunch of startups. I think there's like a couple hundred startups now trying to do it in some form or fashion. And a lot of them probably right now are struggling for money.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the space was. And so when I went down to the Future Food Tech Conference, that was a lot of kind of the reality that set in is what's going on in the space. It wasn't just a cultivated meat show. They talked about plant-based meat. They talked about precision fermentation and things like personalized nutrition. But a lot of the talk was like, how do we scale cultivated meat? And some of the talks were like that about that on stage. And so I think this reality of the funding environment was just kind of like a dark cloud in a way, I think, over the whole space. And so some of the talks on stage were people saying, hey, this is how we're dealing with this new environment, et cetera. So it's just kind of the reality of what we're living in right now.
It's interesting because as I was researching it a little bit, it said it was like originally created from cow cells. Is that right? Or like it can be like the cultivated meat?
Well, you can do chicken, you could do cow meat. There are
Right.
people doing cultivated fish, and I actually had my first cultivated meat on this trip. I had salmon, and I also had beef.
Okay. Yeah. How was the salmon, by the way?
Well, it was good. They made a tartare. So I went to essentially a Plate of the Future event put on by Accenture. And I think we have some pictures here we can show the audience.
Oh yeah, I'm very interested in trying it. I think I brought up the cow cells because maybe there's a little bit of, we said it earlier, but a little bit of weirdness people still have. If I hear the word cow cells, it just does freak me out a little bit. And I think
that's
there
the
is
whole
a kind of
pushback against, the whole lab grown meat concept.
yeah,
That term just kind of is gross.
yeah. Let's never say those two words again. I won't. But this is the picture you're showing on stream right now. Was that rice with it?
It's like a couscous, I think.
It looks like a rice patty. It looks weird.
No, wait,
that's not the
that
most appetizing picture, but
that actually, no, that is like a crisp. So you were able to just put the tartare on like a crisp and eat it like a cracker. Yep. Then I also had meat.
Though?
I had beef by Sci-Fi Foods.
Mm.
It was good. I mean, the tartare, it had a lot of other things on top of it. It wasn't like eating a fillet. When you originally start talking about this idea of eating cultivated meat, you think, what's it going to be like slicing into a completely lab grown piece of meat? And that's not the reality that we're looking at. We're looking at things like, for example, just look at this here. This is like a little, dumpling with some of the Sci-Fi Foods beef in it, but it's a hybrid. So it's like probably 10% of their lab grown cells with about 90% plant-based. So,
okay.
Yeah. So a lot of the focus now is we're not going to see completely 100% lab grown cuts of meat in any time in the near future, just because it's too expensive. The idea is like very much being pushed by the industry. We're going to go hybrid. And so
I was going to say the cost is high, right? To do this.
But I'll be honest with you, it makes you start to wonder, like, if you're only going to have 10% of lab grown cells and the bulk of it is plant-based, I think that's why some people are wondering, well, what's the point?
Yeah.
If it's going to be just a little bit of this lab grown meat, are you doing it for the protein? Can you get the savoriness and the flavor of meat without growing 10% of it in like a big bioreactor?
Yeah. Does it bring does that 10% produce such a good flavor, or like you said, some sort of like health reason or health benefit? Chat was asking, was there a public backlash because people don't understand it and thus are scared of it? I think that's definitely part of it. And again, that might be tied to the funding. If people aren't like clamoring for this because they're still kind of freaked out by it. But that said, to play devil's advocate, like I said in our last episode, the future is on the way anyhow. So like the idea that we're going to have to do some of this stuff anyhow, it's just going to be a normal thing. I mean, remember Soylent Green, the movie Soylent Green? That's a bad outcome. But the idea, Soylent Green is a name of a company right now, and they make like some sort of protein drinks. But like that idea that we just, as we move towards the future, we've got to look at different ways to make food for ourselves. It's just getting over that hurdle of like acceptance.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the plant-based stuff's getting better. Here's an example of one I had. So this was one of the ones I tried at an Accenture party. And I think this is like a kebab type of, almost like I think it was like a lamb substitute, but it was completely made of mushroom protein and other things. And the texture and the mouthfeel was really, really good.
Can I just say though, it looks like a mushroom. It looks like just
no, but it didn't. I don't like mushrooms. So I mean, it's fungi protein. So
right,
it's not
right.
like
So
a
it tastes
mushroom.
more like lamb though.
Yeah, and the mouth feels on. You put a little bit of that sauce on there. It tastes pretty good. So it made me just wonder, like, what's the point of like spending $100 million to create all these next generation productions technology when you could just use plant-based meats? Because the new plant-based meats, like they're using fungi, they're using other forms. They're starting to get better and better. I mean, everyone's kind of used to Impossible and Beyond, and those guys that keep moving up and they're doing different generations. I think Impossible or Beyond just announced Generation 4, but we're starting to see some other competitors out there that are doing some pretty good products.
Impossible just dropped their spicy chicken nuggets. I got really excited. I saw them in the store yesterday. I'm going to buy them tonight. But Nugs, we never, have you ever done a story on them? Nuggs.
Yeah, we've written about Nugs. They've been around for like 4 or 5 years, right?
They've been around for a while, but they're spicy Nugs. Oh, it's from Simulate. So Simulate's been around for a bit. And I don't know what they're doing. I think it's the breadcrumbs or something, soy protein, but maybe again, being around for a long time and kind of like going through lots of different iterations. It's just amazing. Like,
do you like Nugs better than the Impossible Nug?
Oh, nugget? Yes, 100%. Like,
is it the texture? Right, is it the mouthfeel? What is it about it? Does it seem more like chicken to you?
No, you know what? Here's the thing. Okay, this is a longer tangent, but I'll go into it really quickly. I grew up vegetarian. We grew up with a lot of early Morning Star. I think that was the Loma Linda. Some of these companies doing veggie meat in the 80s. So I've been eating veggie for a long time with meat as well. And I feel like, over the years, they've just gotten better. But like me personally, I've always had like just an affinity for that textured protein like taste. So I don't need it to taste like meat. And that's what's funny, because we do a lot of these stories and we cover a lot of this, and I make videos a lot of like the new veggie meat that tastes exactly like pork or whatever. I actually don't want it to be. And I'm wondering what the percentage of people out there who are buying this stuff don't even want that. And maybe there's some wires crossed there when it comes to funding and it comes to companies like direction. But I know a lot of us are just like, no, I like the veggie meat. I don't need it to be pepperoni. It's just whatever it is. And so like, that's a long-winded answer to you, because like Nugs is its own thing. If that makes sense. It's like a super spicy flavored thing that I like. Does that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole plant-based meat industry has had that debate, right? Did they go down the wrong road by saying, hey, we're going to create an exact replica of what a hamburger tastes like or a chicken nugget? When in reality, maybe they just said, hey, this is a new thing. So that way you don't have this uncanny valley sense, right? So the thing is, if something's 5% off or 10% off of what you think a meat eating experience is, you're always going to have this kind of discombobulation in your head. Hey, it's a little bit off. But if you go in knowing if you frame it as it's not quite meat, it's like a protein, but it's its own thing, maybe you wouldn't have that uncanny valley.
Expectation is a lot when it comes to a lot of things in life. And Impossible Burger is a great example. Like, they sell them at Burger King now. And if I go to get an Impossible Burger at Burger King, I'm not thinking I'm getting a burger. You know what I mean? I'm getting an Impossible Burger and I know what it's going to taste like. So
the thing about those Burger King ones is, Burger King's always been like flame broiled. Yeah. And they always talk about the flame broil. And when I go and have that Impossible Burger King at Burger King, it tastes like it's got that weird Burger King flame broil spray on it or something. It's like some executive Burger King says it's got to have our flame broiled flavor to it. So it almost seems like it's artificially put on top of it. It just seems a little bit weird to me.
They don't put it through the machine, I don't think, right? Do they? Because they have a machine that they throw the burgers into that does that little flame broil thing. I
don't know.
Anyway.
Also, I don't know if they share the grill. I don't know if they've ever done. They probably don't. I mean, if you're going there to get something that's not meat based, you'd have to do it on a separate grill.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true.
But let's talk about my field trip to San Francisco. You lived in San Francisco.
Sure did.
For, I think, 5 years? That's where we met.
6 years we met down there, yeah.
The Carlos Mike Friendship Origin Stories. I went in to guest on a podcast for Cranky Geeks, and you were running the video cameras there.
Yep, that's what they called it. That was my job, running the video cameras. I was a producer on the show. Yes. Okay. And I worked it with my friend Brooks. And yeah, I worked at Mevio, and we also worked for IDG, and we did a lot of stuff with Ziff Davis. So yeah, I was doing a ton of tech shows, and you came in as a guest, and I was like, "Who's this guy?"
Who's this guy? And John Dvorak was the host, of PC Mag fame. That's where he became famous, right? I think also CNET, or was he CDNet?
CNET, I think, and PC Mag. Yeah, I used to read his articles, and then was doing a show with him all of a sudden. And you pop up, and we kind of always been talking about tech ever since. So.
And Mevio was ran by a former MTV VJ, that tall guy.
I didn't even plan that. That's my shirt today.
But what was his name? Is
Adam Curry. Adam Curry.
Yeah, for old MTV trivia buffs. Adam Curry was there. And I'm like, I think the first time I was there, and I'm going, this guy is the guy that I remember seeing on NMTV. And he's way taller than you think in person. He's like Howard Stern height.
He's like 18 feet tall. Yeah. Yeah, that was a good time. There's a lot of weirdness how it all ended. At some point, it had to. I don't know. It just kind of we burned too quick. We did a lot of different web shows. I was actually just reminiscing that because of the gaming industry, to bring it back real quick, is in such a weird free fall right now and change. Back then, those were the heady days of gaming journalism because I was a producer on many shows. They just gave me budgets for other shows and I just ran with it. Like when you met me, I was like kind of balling. And the fact that like I did not want for money. So I was fine there. And I was just making shows. And yeah, all that money's gone. Like there's GameSpot and IGN left, maybe a couple others, but that was an interesting time.
Well, the weird thing was about my trip to San Francisco was it was in the Marriott in downtown and is the Future Food Tech Show. And at the same time happening in San Francisco was the Game Developers Conference. So I'd see these guys with the GDC shirts running around. And I emailed my friend Gar Godfrey, who was co-founder of Gamehouse. I don't know if you remember Gamehouse, that they got acquired by Real Networks at some point, but I was going, are you in town? And he was, but we couldn't connect. But anyway, long story short, I was there for the show and I flew into San Francisco and I saw guys like this. So I saw this guy at the airport. I go, oh my gosh, sitting. This is such a San Francisco thing.
It is.
A guy with the VR headset just sitting there in public. He wasn't driving a Tesla though. That would have been truly San Francisco. But
by the way, that is a dangerous thing to do. Just be walking around the streets, I think, with an Apple Vision Pro on your head. It's like, hey, come and take me.
Yeah, he was in the safer confines of like the terminal at the airport. But yeah, I don't know if I'd do that in San Francisco.
You shouldn't.
But I walked. So I flew in, and I took the BART into downtown. I walked all the way to Mista, which is this food innovation center, and I walked through the Mission District, saw all sorts of cool murals. I forgot how cool the Mission District is, by the way.
It's so cool. I used to live there a little bit too, off of Valencia, and yeah, every like corner is an amazing piece of art.
Yeah, and just Mexican so much cool. Yeah, I had to stop at like a taco stand. I almost stopped at two of them, and I eventually went to Mista. So Mista, for those who don't know, is this big innovation hub. It's a center started by Givaudan, which is one of the biggest flavor and aroma companies in the world. Also Bueller, a big Swiss equipment company. They make things like these big metal tanks like bioreactors. And so they were there. And so this was their new facility, kind of it wasn't in the best area of the Mission District, but it was kind of near like the waterfront. And they were showing off a new extrusion machine like this. They actually had a ribbon cutting for this thing. I think it's right here. Like they're actually doing like the ribbon cutting. They're all taking pictures while I was there. It's pretty funny. But the reason why this is cool is for like, so what Mista does is they'll bring in food tech startups. Like, hey, if you're like an entrepreneur and you're trying to build like the next generation alternative meat, alternative chicken, you need like big iron equipment and you can't afford it. And so what they do is they have this ecosystem they're trying to curate. They'll say, hey, do you want to be part of our innovation ecosystem? Come here. You can use our hardware, like this extruder. I think I actually have a video. It's kind of this crazy looking video. Let's see if I can show it here.
Yeah, I'm guessing extruders are expensive.
Yeah, it just sounds expensive, right?
Yeah, and huge metal machinery, and you're talking about startups and stuff. So yeah, it makes sense to kind of share that.
I'm gonna see if I can. So they actually couldn't show the thing working because they just commissioned it. But this is the type of thing that extruders do.
I know, but what am I looking at? Why does it look not appetizing?
It doesn't, but it's basically it's high moisture extrusion. They're spitting out essentially meat analogs that have the texture and the feel of meat, and it looks kind of gross, right?
It sure does. It sure does. Got to be honest. That one was red. That seemed more like taffy or something.
Yeah, where they're showing off how they can add their colors and their different.
This goes back to what we were saying. Like, I don't know. I wonder if that's going to be a problematic thing for them. Just in them being all companies, do they need to go the route of reproducing it?
Well, this is even how you make plant-based stuff. So like a
Okay.
plant-based chicken burger patty or something. That wasn't cell grown or anything.
Okay.
That was
Okay.
basically and it looks weird coming out, but it wouldn't look like that if it actually was a packaged product. But essentially it kind of reminds me of like the old Play-Doh machines. Did you
Yes, it
remember
sure
like
does. Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy. But it makes a lot of sense to kind of share that technology. Because it is, yeah, it's so the entry fee to get some of that machinery is crazy.
this is what it reminds me of.
Oh, you
You see
saved
that?
the Play-Doh trailer. Yeah. Well, don't do the audio because it will get claimed. Hit the audio off. There you go. That's streaming 101. You're gonna get copyright claimed.
So there's the extrusion like as a child.
Yes, and now it's meat. Well, now it's veggie meat.
Yeah. So it's basically just a big Play-Doh machine is what it is.
Yeah. By the way, I need to bring this up because I don't know if we ever did. Back to my earlier tangent, we might have, but I'm not sure it's not been on this new show. So we'll put it in for posterity and like archival features. But one of the first meats I ever had, and they still sell it just a little bit here and there online, and it's like frozen, was called Wham. Did I tell you about this?
Mm-mm.
Wham, right? You think of like, and it was in the 80s. So you think of like the 80s group Wham. It is still some of my favorite tasting meat. Whatever they're putting in there, we need to look it up and find out what the ingredients were. These
So it's
new
like
startups.
it was generation 1 or 2, like way before Impossible.
It was like the first generation, like literally 0-1 generation of like they called it ham, right? Again, Wham supposed to be like ham.
So
It
were they playing out kind of as almost like being a spam alternative?
Yes, because it was sliced and it was frozen, and so like it was frozen or sliced in the deli area, so like kitchen, refrigerated, and then you would put it in sandwiches, and it was incredible. Again, didn't taste really like Wham, maybe a little more like Spam, but it was its own thing. But the flavor profile was so good. So, hey, all you
Wham.
innovative
All right.
startups, go back and try to find the ingredients to Wham. That's a pro tip for you.
All right. All right.
All right,
So that was
moving
my
on.
trip down to San Francisco. It was a lot of fun. Got to check in with some of what the startups are doing. Taste my first cultivated meat, and yeah.
Well, let me
I
ask
had
you
to
a
sign
question
it.
about. Oh, go ahead.
I had to sign basically a health disclaimer though. That was the whole thing. When you're eating this really cutting edge meat, you have to sign basically, hey, I absolve this company of all responsibility if I ever get like cancer down the road or something.
Wow.
I think they're just covering all the bases. Their lawyers make you sign a disclaimer. So
That makes sense. I was going to ask a quick question. Like when you were down there and you were at these, you were at that little show and just in general, I don't know, the feel, did you feel like a vibe of, hey, we're going to make it through this? Like, even though there's budget cuts, like the people you talk to were still excited. There's like plans in the future, like what was the vibe?
yeah, I think it was one of, hey, we need to keep our runways lasting. The easy money's gone. And so we need to find out ways to get to market and monetize more quickly. So, I think, and there's like talk on stage, there's a panel on, how do we get to market and scale in alternative protein in this new reality? And a lot of the conversation centered around, hey, the money from, where people were writing checks and thought alternative protein was going to be this big cash cow, all that money's gone. So like the casual investor's gone, but you still have a lot of the sustainability focused venture investors that are there, but just the checks are not going to be nearly as big. A lot of the money's ultimately coming from now governments or type of things. That's the Good Fit Institute has been advocating for, hey, we need to move beyond venture investing. We need like, the U.S. to invest in this. You've seen this in Singapore, you're seeing it in Israel, and you're seeing it in China, where you're seeing governments actually write some of these checks, and they're making an analogy to the EV industry, where you saw a bunch of money go into infrastructure for EV. They're trying to compare it to that and how we need to kind of lay the groundwork for that. So, I mean, it's a logical pitch for them to make.
Yeah, it makes sense. It seems like you said, the big money's not there, but the constant funding's there, and also the look towards the future of how to monetize and do it on your own and start making your own money.
So, yeah, I mean, so I think there's also some focus on, not as much as I would expect it, but like the whole concept of picks and shovels, back in the early days of the internet. there was a lot of talk about, hey, we need to build kind of the picks and shovels for the hard iron for them for the internet. There's been talk for the last couple of years of like a lot of investment should be going into building infrastructure for building cultivated meat or plant-based meat. And so there were some of those startups there, but probably not as much as I would have thought. So
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Well, final story. I always get these inbound pitches for cool food robots, fun food robots. So I got one today. I want to show it. It's called the Pizza Bot. It's from a company out of Sweden, I think. Coffee X, not to be confused with Cafe X. You remember those guys in San Francisco?
Mm-hmm.
But they are making a pizza robot called Pizza Bot. And let me see if I can show this video.
It's a great name.
What you're about to see is PizzaBot's vision to create the food outlets of the future. PizzaBot takes advantage of the latest robotic technology to deliver you a fun, fast, and amazing pizza dining experience. Let's take a closer look. To order, simply choose your desired flavor and wave your fingers in front of the corresponding illuminated button. Then use contactless payment to complete your purchase. PizzaBot is the world.
By the way, I like the clearness. I like the fact you can see in it.
Yeah, I do that. That's nice.
And I don't know how to stop this the audio, but let's see if we've finished.
What you're about to see is PizzaBot's.
It's okay.
Looks like it's just going to keep. So anyway, you get the picture. It's kind of different than any automated vending machine I've seen in that it's basically completely, you see inside, which is kind of cool because most of these are big boxes that look like more traditional vending machines.
Yeah, I like the clear look and you're seeing what's being made. That's always just fun in general.
Yeah, and he didn't tell me how it worked, but I think it's probably just heating a frozen one. It doesn't, I doubt it's like baking dough from scratch. It probably is taking one that's heating it up.
But then if that's the case, then is it?
It's a pizza vending machine. It doesn't
pizza vending machine. Yeah. Didn't we remember we saw some in Vegas? And that was just as fun, right? Pizza vending machines. I think we saw a couple. Yeah. I think it again depends on the taste. Like, what's that pizza taste like when it comes out of it?
Oh yeah, we got to see what we're going to go back watch a meetup. Watch this.
What you're about to see is PizzaBot's vision to create the food outlets of the future.
I can't fast forward it. Anyway, at the end, he actually eats it.
By the way, that's the whole joke of this whole show. It keeps going back to the beginning.
Mike doesn't know how to use the AV
I'm going to do it
controls
on purpose now. It's like a callback.
Yeah.
What you're about to see is PizzaBot's.
It's comedy. Let's ask a question while we think about the pizza for a minute. We got a question here in chat. Food service hospitality startup. What do you think about a company that does catering, corporate, residential catering, weddings, personal chef, meal prep, order online, pickup, delivery, all under one roof of a company instead of searching for 4 or 5 other companies? Did you get that? I read that kind of weird.
Yeah. So we think of a startup concept that does all these things under one roof.
I think that's it. Yeah.
So essentially, is it a ghost kitchen concept? I mean, I don't know exactly how he's framing it. I mean, there's companies like Aramark and all those guys that do a lot of these things already, but they don't do residential catering.
Yeah,
I'm interested. I'd have to know more information, Chef Hawk. I think that's who's submitting the question. I don't know exactly how you're building this. If it's just like a centralized ghost kitchen or something, but it sounds intriguing.
Yeah, one-stop shop. Drop a comment, a follow-up if you want. But before that, we got to get back.
What you're about to see is PizzaBot's vision to create the food outlets of.
That's never going to get old, and I'm going to keep that video in this deck for us.
Yeah.
They're getting free promo every time we start it.
It's going to be our Rickroll. You're going to Rickroll me with the pizza
exactly. Oh, I did that back in the day. We were talking about San Francisco. I had a show called Rad on the Web. Do you remember that show?
No.
Maybe you never even watched it. Oh my goodness, you didn't even know. And we'd always go back to a couple of videos. So yeah.
So Chef Hack says it's not a ghost kitchen, just kind of maybe a centralized. Does it have walk up, Chef Hack? Can you actually go into the restaurant? Anyway, we'll see if he gets back to us. But we're about to wrap this up. I appreciate folks joining. It looks like he joined from YouTube. There's some people joined on Twitch today. We just started our Twitch channel, so this thing's just embryonic at this point. But
Yeah, we're early days. We're going to be on all the platforms. You can see the following video that you're watching right now. If you missed it, on Twitch as a video on demand, also on YouTube. And I'll be making clips. I just made a first couple clips of us talking about robots and kitchens. Those will go up on YouTube and Reels and TikTok. So check all the places for all the stuff.
All right. Hey, Carlos, thanks for joining me, man.
Wait, you're welcome. But before we go,
what you're about to see is Pizza Port's vision to create the food outlets of the future.
All right.
And with that, goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
What you're about to see is